listen to them. Children of the night, what music they make.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Before we get our show started this afternoon, please make sure to click on like and subscribe and leave a comment in the comment section below. And if you are so inclined, help us out on patreon.com/the Mad Mamluks. Our show this evening / afternoon is with Brother Abu Abdul Aziz, who wrote this wonderful book called Islam versus Superstition. I brought him on the show particularly because, you know, it's the season. Right, Brother Abdul Aziz? I don't know if you guys celebrate over there, but, you know, it's a Halloween season over here. And there's a lot of things related to superstition and things like that. And I was, you know, not that we celebrate Halloween as Muslims, but I just wanted to, you know, make a common theme during this season. Yeah, it was a couple seasons ago. A couple years ago, we had someone who was an exorcist, a Muslim exorcist, and they did ruqya, and they talked about various experiences during that, and it was a fun show that we had. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, you know what drew me to your book first was that it was a methodology. You know, it was like how you think and how you structured the book, because many of these books or type of books get riddled with quotations from Abu someone, Ibn someone, and I want to know what the author thinks. And I think you did that, and along with many other things related to the book, I wanted to know a little bit about how and why you approached the book the way you did.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm what do you call it? I'm happy to hear that you found your way to the book. Regarding the methodology, I mean, this book, when I sat down and started to write it, I thought, instead of drawing on authority and who said what, I mean, whenever there is a topic and you have different camps who are discussing and debating, instead of focusing on who said what, I think it's more important to look at what was being said because of what. If you get my drift, I mean, we should look at the arguments for pro and con an idea.
Yeah.
So this is the basic. What do you call it? Basic approach I had in mind when I wrote the book. So that's why you won't find many quotations in the book.
Well, one of the most important things about reading a book like this, for me at least, was that if I had known some of the superstitious beliefs related to Islam and Muslims, at least even from the textual evidences, and we can get into that later, is that, you know, things like black dogs are evil, or you have to tell the snake or ask the snake permission to leave the house before you, didn't take some kind of action to remove it, you know? Those kind of things seem ridiculous, you know, and I don't mean to mince my words, because it just doesn't seem like, it doesn't seem plausible, or it doesn't make sense to the reason and ration that a human being has, that you would instinctively take care of something that's dangerous, or why a black dog is evil, for example, right? So when you're growing up as a young Muslim, you're already being challenged with your belief in the creator, right? With the attacks from atheism and whatnot. So approaching this book, Was that your approach with this book? That, hey, I need to help make these things make sense for young Muslims?
I think in reality, I had multiple, what do you call it, motivations for writing the book. I mean, first of all, it's a kind of my broadcast of, okay, how should we view Islam? I mean, what is Islam, and what are the Islamic views on these beliefs? This is one of the main points, but also, I mean, it's also my way of helping other Muslims who are stuck in this kind of dilemma or paradox that you're referring to. Because on one hand we believe in metaphysics, and on the other hand we don't want to accept any ridiculous idea. I mean, so how do we reconcile, I mean, being rational with metaphysics, accepting only the ideas that we're supposed to accept, and what do you call it, get rid of the ideas that we're not supposed to accept? So I mean, yeah. I think this is
and that's what you actually laid down in the first few pages of your book, the actual framework of thinking and how to contextualize whatever information that you're encountering, and how to make a proper judgment on things that you're coming across. So I think that in itself was very valuable, at least from someone who had difficulty in how we as Muslims, we don't want to be, from a layman's point of view, you don't want to like discredit Hadith, right? You don't want to say like, hey, I don't want to accept this Hadith because it doesn't make sense, because who are you to say you're not a scholar, right? But on the other hand, you don't have that accessibility to a scholar to help it make sense for you either, and those type of scholars are few and far between in terms of their ability to analyze some of these very sometimes, at least on surface value, they're problematic, right? You don't know how to make sense of them. And let's first walk through let's walk through a few examples. Let's talk about the black dogs, right? So what was your approach with handling that superstition related to the black dog?
I mean, first of all, it was looking at thinking about the society in the time of the Prophet. Okay, first of all, this hadith, it's khabar ahad, okay, and we don't want to reject khabar ahad just straight out because it doesn't make sense. Instead, we should try to contextualize it and understand, okay, what was the what do you call it, the intention, I mean, the intended meaning of this specific what do you call it, statement.
And for the viewers, for the listeners who don't know what that means, khabar ahad means a single chain of narrators, meaning there weren't the narrators that heard it from the Prophet. There was only one sequence one sequence of narrators that could validate the hadith. That doesn't so a stronger hadith would have multiple chains of narrators, but the majority of hadith, as we Sunni Muslims know, is that majority of them are khabar ahad, right?
So, I mean, on the one hand, we don't want to reject them straight out whenever it doesn't make sense. And on the other hand, we don't want to accept anything without really understanding what the meaning is. I mean, the intended meaning. So when thinking about black dogs, okay, we have some black dogs. And what does the hadith say? It says they are shaitan or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when thinking about the word shaitan, I mean, it could be the shaitan, Iblis, or it could be referring to something evil. I mean, something you don't like or something you dislike.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how to make sense of the black dog? Okay, why only the black dog then?
Yeah.
For instance, I mean, so asking these kinds of questions, it will help you contextualize. Okay, what could the meaning of the hadith be? I mean, and I mean, scholars also did this in the past. That's why I didn't want to draw on authority, but I just wanted to show in the book that okay, this is the way, or the scholars of this ummah also approach these kind of problematic hadith. So not just to accept them on face value without really understanding them.
Yeah.
Just saying, okay, Shaitan means devil. So, and the devil is the devil. It's Iblis, and Iblis is a jinn. So maybe the black dog is a jinn. I mean, this way of.
So how do you explain that in the book?
Can I look?
Yeah.
I don't really remember.
So, like so at least like that, and there's also the issue of the snakes. It reminded me of a story about me waking up from a dream once, thinking there's a snake between my legs. I was terrified. I thought there was some snake that crawled into my bed, and I was really worried about having to ask it permission to leave, because when you wake up, you're in a haze. You don't have your senses about you. So I woke up and I'm terrified, thinking that I have a snake in my bed, and then I have to ask it permission to leave. And that kind of problematic issue happens when you read a hadith like that, where it says you should ask permission of a snake to leave the house, or if it doesn't leave, then it was shaitan, So, I mean, those kind of things are a little bit suspicious, at least when you read them and you're like, wait a second, this doesn't appeal to my intellect to reason why I should behave in the way I'm supposed to in this kind of situation.
Yeah, of course, and I mean, the first thing is it could be a good thing because it could lead you to start questioning things and trying to figure them out, and maybe you'll get an answer that'll satisfy your intellect, and you'll say, oh, well, okay, that's fine. But I mean, one of the dangers is that it'll make you suspicious of the entire religion. I mean, say, okay, well, if this is Islam, then Islam is weird, if you know what I mean. I mean, in a sense, it could lead you to generalize on the entire religion based on your own misunderstanding.
Yeah.
This is one of the dangers about superstition, because I mean, some of this issue with the black dog and some of the other issues, they're minor issues, and they're not really that. They're not relevant for everyone, but I mean, ideas such as possession or magic or the evil eye, and I mean, these are more they're more spread out, and they become relevant in all Muslims' lives in a sense, because everybody gets sick or everybody feels maybe depressed, or we all experience something that might be explained by these superstitious ideas. So in that sense, they become more relevant for a lot of Muslims. And if you have a young Muslim who is skeptical about these ideas, and you insist that these are Islamic ideas, that could lead him to reject the entire faith.
Right. Now, the whole concept of the jinn as well is very, confusing for a lot of Muslims, because to what level are these beings involved in our lives? How much, because there's many different approaches, at least from what scholars and how they deal with things related to the unseen, right? Not necessarily some, but maybe there is that materialist approach where there are people who say that, you know what, whatever you have in front of you and whatever's in the observable reality is all that matters. None of this not necessarily hocus pocus, but none of the stuff that is in the unseen is actually relevant to us at all. So they discredit anything related to even the evil eye, even though that's mentioned in the Quran and things like that. It's they don't. There's no implications. There's no change of behavior or interaction with the faith related to it.
Everything that is related to the metaphysics. I mean, basically they're rejecting everything metaphysically, and this is, I mean, it's going to one of the extremes. I mean, in my view.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, we saw this happening in during the what do you call it, the colonization period, when the Westerners they appeared with their scientists and thinkers, and they challenged the Muslims. For instance, in Hindustan, you had a lot of thinkers coming there as a reaction to the, what do you call it, intellectual onslaught brought by the British, who were saying, okay, you believe in these weird ideas, and some of them, they went so far that they started to explain away miracles, explain away almost everything related to metaphysics.
Right.
And this is also, I mean, this approach is also problematic because there are clear references and clear mentioning of metaphysical ideas in both in the Quran and the.
But doesn't some of those people would say that the counterpoint is that the faith, the entire belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to believe Him without seeing Him, without the impediment or without the vehicle of miracles pushing you to that belief. So why would you need that to be part of the faith?
I mean, you can argue like that, but I mean, okay, if you want to zoom out, and you can take one approach that says that okay, belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's rational. I mean, you can figure. I mean, you can just use your intellect and you'll deduce that okay, the universe must be created. But when answering which of the messages is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you need a proof, and that proof would be a miracle. That would be one approach. So that would answer the question of the need for miracles. So I mean, in the debate that okay, are the references to the what do you call it, supernatural events, are they really to be taken literally, or should they just be explained away as metaphors or whatever? When you take the first approach and you understand the need for miracles, then it becomes completely rational to expect miracles. I mean, there isn't anything superstitious or irrational or silly or whatever you would call it about believing in the possibility of miracles. Not that they're happening every day, and I mean, wherever we look, there's a miracle and stuff like that. But that could be a miracle whenever there is a prophet or Nabi or Rasul sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So when you're encountering this, I don't know if you have any children or any kids that you encounter, how would you approach? How would you give them a structure in how to understand a lot of these type of hadith related to, superstition?
Well, it depends on. I mean, you can just lay out one type of yardstick to measure every hadith, because it really depends on the topic. I mean.
Okay, let me give you an example. So you buy a new car, and you say, hey, you know what? Make sure you say. Someone says, make sure you say, mashallah, and then the child or kid asks, well, why should I say mashallah? And then the other say, oh, well, this is the way to protect yourself from the evil eye. So, well, what's the evil eye? And then they go on to explain, well, the evil eye is a look or a gaze at something with jealousy, and or a willingness or a wish for that person to have want the same thing, and then that gaze somehow causes damage to whatever someone procured, whether it's a car or whatever. So on the surface level, when you think about it, you're like, this doesn't make any sense to me, right? It doesn't. How could someone's look at a car or an inanimate object that someone possesses with jealousy or any kind of malice or hate, how could that cause damage, to someone's property? In our belief, from what I've taught, that what I've been learned was that it's something that is, it's a ghaib. You can't make sense of this thing. You don't know how it works. There's not enough information to make proper conclusions surrounding it. So you just kind of leave it as it is, and you don't necessarily try to form any kind of theory or any. You don't explore it much more than what the surface level already offers. It just it's something you've been told to say mashallah when someone gets something, and that's what you do, and you don't ask me any questions about it. What's your perspective on that? Is that sufficient? Is that what you would teach your kids if they asked about this?
No, I mean, there are more aspects to this particular question.
Go ahead.
One of the things is that okay, you can't really accept anything without asking, okay, why should I do this? Why? Like you said in your question, in your example, that you at least, okay, why do we want me to say mashallah? And when you get this explanation, then the next question would be, okay, where did you learn from that we should say mashallah in order to protect ourselves from the evil eye? Okay, that would be the next question. And the third question would be, okay, where did this concept of the evil eye come from? And you mentioned the Quran, and there is in Surah Falaq, وَمِنْ شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. That we're seeking refuge from a number of things, and from the evil of the envier when he envies. And in the book, actually, I explain this verse as that you're seeking refuge from the evil, the shar of the hasid. The fa'il, the one who is performing the action of being jealous. So when you're referring to the eye, it's not that he's looking, but it starts with him looking, being envious, and that'll manifest in his actions. So in the example with you have a Chrysler or BMW or Maserati or whatever car you have, and somebody sees it and becomes jealous, and you've just parked outside a cafe. You went inside to grab a cup of coffee. So he'll take out his keys and scratch your car. So this is the evil eye. It's still bound to actions. Human actions. It's not just him looking at your car, but the
you're saying the evil eye is tied to physical nature. It's completely physical and it's not necessarily that there's something supernatural happening.
Yeah, no. So it's a reference to envy. To being envious.
Okay.
Because it starts with the eye. That's why it's related to an ayn. Because you see something, you become envious, and then you try to harm either the property or the person who owns the property.
Well, I know you're aware of this, but many people would beg to differ with you on this specific point. They would say that this is completely incorrect. The evil eye can and does affect people just by a look, and there is something supernatural to how it works that they can't necessarily explain, and they don't know why. Some people have or are more susceptible to it than others. They can't give you a framework around how it operates.
and I mean, this idea of the evil eye, it's pre-Islamic. It's maybe, I don't remember the exact period when it became.
Well, it's throughout all
normal.
societies right now. Well, we know that, at least from the history of the world, we know that most societies have some kind of version of this phenomena.
Yeah. And I mean, so what I explain in the book is that some Muslims, when they read these texts, the Quranic verse and other hadith, when they read them, they understood them in light of this concept. So they, what do you call it? What do you call it when you infer an idea upon?
Project it.
Yeah, they projected the idea, the superstitious idea, the superstitious understanding of a concept. They projected it onto the text.
Okay.
Because the text in themselves, they don't say anything about an invisible power or something like that, or an invisible arrow shooting out from your soul, or all these meta explanations we get of the concept of the evil eye. Because the evil eye itself, in both in the Hadith and in the Quran, doesn't say anything about an invincible power, an invisible power. They just refer to something which, on face value, without this concept, if you took a razor and you pulled out the entire idea of the evil eye and just read the text, you would just understand that it's somebody being envious. And it's an exercise you have to do for yourself. I mean, in order for it to be completely clear. I mean, then you would see, okay, wow, it is actually just about being envious.
I think many. I don't think you're going to win many friends with this.
I know.
So I remember reading your disclaimer that, hey, I'm going to upset some of you guys when you read this book, that it goes against whatever your conventional teachings are related to this. You are not a materialist, though, right? You still recognize that there are miracles in the Quran.
When Allah describes how Musa he split the sea and it stood like two mountains. I believe it did stand like two mountains.
Yeah.
It wasn't any metaphor. It wasn't
you believe in the Virgin Mary, that she was a virgin.
Yeah.
Okay, so because there are views out there related to that too, that even the miracles that were all bound to physical reality, and everything has to conform to the laws of nature as well. So that's a different argument for a different day, but at least from what we're talking about, we can try to figure out at least some of the elements related to how superstition has kind of crept into our faith and culture as well. Things that are related to culture and superstition from someone's native region sometimes get superimposed on Islam, and many people confuse.
And you'll find examples of it if you look into the world right now, because the concept of sihr, for instance, magic.
Yeah.
The particular manifestation of how this sihr is, it's bound to cultures. So
Yeah.
In Africa, you have a different kind of voodoo or magic, and in Morocco, in Pakistan, the concept would be the same overall, or abstractly speaking. But, the way you fill it out, the specifics, it'll vary, bound to culture.
So what is your view on magic? Do you feel like there is no sihr, or that sihr is something that has become some kind of, they're a bunch of charlatans, and that they don't necessarily do anything?
Okay, so sihr, the magic, as illusions, optical illusions, and tricks and deception.
Well, we're not talking about magic tricks. We're talking about sihr, meaning people who are witches.
Yeah. So all the supernatural concept of sihr. No, I argue that it's not real. It's not real. The thing that is real is somebody playing a trick on you, deceiving you, what you would call magic tricks.
So you don't believe any of these spells and sorcerers, and what about the fellows Harut and Marut, those people I think differ on them whether they're angels or whether they were human beings, but they were apparently sent as a test to humanity, and they had I don't know whether it's a book of spells or or whatever, but they came on to civilization, at least the first conception of civilization in, I don't know if it was Mesopotamia or whatever, but in Babylon they taught this stuff to people. So what do you make of that?
You want the short version or the long version?
Either version, just helping me make sense of it.
Okay. I mean, so in the Quran, there's a mention of Harut and Marut in Babylon, and it's a long verse in Surah Baqarah, ayah 102. It starts with that it clears the name of Sulaiman alayhi salam, but he did not do sihr. It was the shayateen who were disbelievers instead. And then it continues and talks about what was sent down or what wasn't sent down in the Babylon of Harut and Marut. And it says that they had something they taught people, and they told them, do not learn this from us, but if you want to learn it, okay, but it will be a kind of kufr, and it will be something that you can cause division between man and wife.
Do you believe them to be angels or no?
No, not necessarily. I mean, this verse is very ambiguous. I mean, it has a lot of uncertainties about, okay, what is the meaning of this? And if you look at the different statements in the verse, it can go almost in every direction. I mean, it's a very ambiguous verse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of them, I mean, I have a whole sub-chapter explaining and discussing this verse in the book, also drawing on tafsir and what scholars said, and also my own take on it. And I also translated, a large portion of Al-Jassas, his tafsir on this ayah. Because I think it's one of the most precise of the classical tafsir I've read on this verse.
Okay, give us a synopsis or a summary of what was he saying? What was his argument?
I mean, basically, he's saying that what I just said before, that this isn't about magic in the supernatural sense. It's about trickery, and he goes on and explains, and he brings stories about how. There was a Khalifa, I don't remember, it was Muqtadid, I think it was, who was fooled by, it was a servant, who had a crush on one of the girls who lived in the palace, and he would find out ways to go and see her and talk to her. Okay?
Yeah.
And so the Khalifa, he was like, okay, I saw somebody and now he's gone. So he began to think, okay, maybe this is a jinn, maybe this is a spirit, maybe it's somebody doing magic on me. So he tried to look out this guy who was appearing and disappearing in his palace. Okay, and the story ends that, okay, he couldn't find him, and he built a wall, and he had guards guarding this wall as a lookout post, and I mean, he couldn't make any sense of this. And then so the Khalifa, he died, and he never understood what was happening. I mean, and then he explains that, okay, the reality of this was that there was a servant who had a crush on this girl who lived in the palace, and he would disguise himself So the Khalifa would see him, and then he would bring out a search party, and he would disguise himself or hide in a tree, or hide in the garden, or whatever, and thereby fooling the Khalifa. So his point is that for the Khalifa, it was something unexplainable. That's why he brought in the concept of magic. But in reality, there was a natural explanation. And he brings forth an argument that says, okay, so if you have a simple guy who has an interest, he has a crush on a girl, and he can fool the Amir al-Mu'mineen, okay? So what do you think that people who have made trickery and tricks their livelihood, what kind of tricks do you think they can play on people? This is his basic.
But I mean, it's not addressing any of the issues related to, like, for example, the Prophet, being affected by sihr and things like that. He's not even, addressing any of that, but he's just kind of using.
In his tafsir he does, but I mean, he does it very briefly, and he just says that these are, myths spread out by people who didn't know anything, and they crept into the bulk of hadith. So they were just myths. They were just common people saying nonsense about the Prophet being affected by magic, and somehow they crept into the hadith literature.
Well, I mean, that's a bold claim to make, because what happens with that is you're not only, let's just say you're discounting the statement, the hadith, but you're also making each of those narrators of that hadith suspect. Because
I as a for supplementing and to bring background understanding of it, I also dealt with the hadith in depth. I took all the chains of narration leading to this hadith, and based on the books of hadithin in Tarj and Ta'dil, who is a trustworthy narrator and stuff like that. The literature that deals with that, and I've analyzed all the chains of narration for this hadith, and I conclude that this is a weak narration.
But the argument will be made that you're not a muhaddith. You don't have that ability. Let's just say I don't know. I'm just trying to be a proper interlocutor with you, and just kind of push back at you, and see how you would respond to some of the criticism related to this. They would say, brother Abdul Aziz, you're not or maybe you are. Maybe you could explain that. Like I do, maybe you've had training related to ilm hadith and stuff.
Let's look at the things I'm saying and why I'm saying them, not.
Yeah.
You have the qualifications. Did you study at this madrasa or this university? Yeah. And instead of going there, let's look at what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. Because, the main narrator of the hadith that the Prophet he was affected by magic. It's Hisham bin Urwa. Okay. And from the books of hadithin, you can read, and I've also included it in the book. They say that he was one of the teachers of Imam Malik in Medina, and then he later on in life he moved to Kufa or Iraq. Okay, so the first thing is, and when he moved to Iraq, Imam Malik himself, he wouldn't accept narrations coming from people of from Iraq. Attributed to him because he became senile when he moved to Iraq. So even Imam Malik, he would reject the narrations coming from Iraq attributed to Hisham bin Urwa. So the first question is, when did Hisham bin Urwa narrate this story about the Prophet being affected by magic? Imam Malik's Muwatta, it doesn't have any mention of this hadith. Not one mention. In the whole Muwatta, you can look from cover to cover. You won't find any mention of it. So, when he was a student of Hisham bin Urwa, he never heard this story. Okay, so maybe Hisham bin Urwa only mentioned this in Iraq. Okay, he could have mentioned it before, so it's a possibility. But when you look up the narrators who attribute this story to Hisham bin Urwa, there are, I think, 9 out of 10, they are from Iraq. So the story did originate in Iraq. It wasn't in Medina. Okay.
So do you know who the original person who heard it from the Prophet? Was it Abu Huraira or?
He attributed it to his father, who was the nephew of Aisha radiallahu anha. So the chain of narration is Hisham bin Urwa to his father, Urwa to Aisha, who is the narrator in the story.
Okay.
But he's the main narrator, and when you look at,
so you're saying Imam Malik did not deem him to be a credible narrator. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So okay, to
Iraq. Yeah.
And he's the only one who's narrating this idea, or who's pushing this idea
he's the main narrator.
The main narrator.
You have other narrators.
Okay.
But they are involved in what you call ta'dil. And ta'dil, it has different branches. Ta'dil means basically to wrong attribution. It's the basics of ta'dil. So and it can have multiple forms.
Wrong attribution to what?
I mean, it's like saying that I heard this from you. I'm telling a third guy, I heard this from you. And then we found out, okay, it wasn't from you. I heard this from somebody else.
Okay.
So the scholars they've categorized this as it could be intentional and evil, because then you're trying to
sometimes the brain, the human brain kind of mixes up things, and this study ta'dil is an attempt to make sense of what kind of got confused with what.
No. Ta'dil in itself is to say that Mudallis, the one who is Mudallis, he is the one who mixes up who he heard the story from.
Yeah.
So, and Tadlis, not Tadil, Tadlis, it has different forms, different categories. Some of them are close to being telling a lie, and the other ones are making an honest mistake. So we have this whole spectrum. Okay, so it's not that, okay, this guy he confuses who he heard the story from, and therefore he's a liar. That's a way too simplistic way of looking at it. So you can have that, okay, this guy sometimes he mixed it up, but he didn't do it intentionally. Okay, so he has the benefit of doubt. You don't say anything evil about him and stuff like that. So you have Hisham bin Urwa as the main narrator of the story of the Prophet. He was affected by magic. He's the main narrator, and when doing a proper analysis, you can see that, okay, he spread this story when he was living in Iraq, in the period when he was senile. The rest of the narrators, who also narrate the story, they are involved in tadlis, meaning they confuse who they heard the story from. And this really weakens, it really weakens, especially an extraordinary claim as this. If it was a basic claim, okay, what time is it? Okay, it doesn't matter if you do tadlis. Okay, no problem. It's not that extraordinary. But you have this extraordinary claim that a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was affected by magic. Okay, you need some solid evidence. Not just,
it was always something that was curious to me that didn't make sense, because if the prophet is affected by magic, then that would be problematic in that the authenticity of the wahi could be affected.
Yeah, and I also mentioned, scholars in the past who were opposed to the idea, they mentioned it as an argument, as a counter argument, that, okay, how can you believe in the wahi then? Because if you can be affected So whatever he said when he was affected, what is it? Was it a part of the wahi or wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I expand on this actually, that I said, okay, maybe then you, I mean, if you open this door, then you actually open a gateway that says that anything he said in his entire life, he could be affected by Sahad. You wouldn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely makes sense to me. I just have to, push back at you and make sure that whatever doubts, or at least I know as listeners, because this stuff is new to them, and at least many of them, they don't, they may not have encountered this, these differing viewpoints to what they have learned probably from their parents or the traditional madrasa system or whatever,
Yeah.
So, what when you talk about these ideas, and I know these aren't your ideas, these are, many scholars of the past have talked about these things. You and among others, there's others out there in the world right now that are bringing these issues up and are trying to clarify among young Muslims that, hey, you know what, this isn't necessarily part of our faith. You don't need to really integrate this in part of your core belief system. That you may be able to say, you know what, it's possible, maybe, who knows. I wasn't there. You don't necessarily have to make a judgment on this and make it part of your belief. Well, after you've published this book a few years ago, almost, 3 years ago, I think?
Yeah, in 2018.
2018. Okay. So 2 years ago. And what's been the feedback like? I know it initially started off as a Dutch publication, right? It was in your native tongue. Is that your native tongue?
Yeah, Danish.
Danish,
Not
right?
Dutch.
Sorry, I don't mix up the Netherlands and Denmark.
It's
For
not-
Americans, that's still a big accomplishment if I'm mixing up Denmark and the Netherlands, okay? You don't understand how completely clueless we are. But so in Danish, that was the original publication. Well, what's the feedback like since then?
So I mean, the feedback, it actually started the moment people found out that I was writing the book. I mean, it wasn't even published yet, and I mean, you saw character assassination, and I mean, they were really having a go at me.
Yeah.
He's a kafir, he's a this, he's a that, he does this, he does that. I mean, they were going crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I haven't even wrote it. I mean, I'm not even done yet writing the book.
Yeah. So, I know there's like a Facebook group as well around the book and a lot of different elements surrounding the book. Well, what kind of things are being discussed?
Yeah. So I mean, the people who actually read the book, I mean, 9 out of 10 of those, they gave me really positive feedback. And I mean, even the guys who read it and didn't completely, change their stance, they said, okay, well, I can see where you're coming from, and you have arguments for saying what you're saying. So we respect that, and we're not completely ready to change yet, but we might get there, something like that. So this is the feedback that I got. And others, they completely loved it. They said, okay, we've been waiting for something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going through some of the highlights that I made in the book, related to some of the things that our parents would tell us, when we were young, when we weren't waking up for Fajr, that Iblis is peeing in your ear, he's urinating in your ear or in your mouth or whatever. I'm like, man, what kind of perverted is this? So, look, I don't know the textual evidence behind this. I don't mean to laugh about something that might be sacred to some people, but when you look back at it, or it just seems silly, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not happening. I'm not saying, that I'm rejecting it. I'm just saying that it just seems like something that requires further investigation, more analysis. Yes, we are much more educated than the people, 1,000 years ago or whatever, when they were first compiling these hadith. And maybe we have somewhat of a more critical eye to offer to some of the textual evidence, because I mean, as you laid out, right, when you first come across hadith related to this, it has to, one of the first rules of the criteria of what is acceptable hadith is that it must appeal to reason. Like, it has to make sense. It has to be plausible that, hey, you know what, this is something that is within the scope of what the Prophet talks about, or in his speech and in his mannerisms and the words he uses and the subjects that he discusses. What I mean, when you do you accept that Iblis pees in your ear or urinates in your ear if you don't pray Fajr, or when you're trying to wake up for Fajr?
I mean, the hadith itself, when you read it at face value, it doesn't make any sense. So like, okay, somebody is peeing on me right now, but I can't feel anything. So why are you telling me that he's peeing on me?
Yeah.
This would be the first thing. That okay, and somebody else is throwing up on me right now, but I can't feel anything. So what does it have to do with me? I mean, and do I need to do ghusl? I don't need to do ghusl. So why are you telling me this? How is it relevant?
I don't know if you know of some. I don't know if you know any of the hip hop stars over here who've been in trouble for urinating.
Okay.
But there are some people who may be more plausible people who might be urinating on you than.
No.
Like, I don't think that's it, please, bro.
I'll look into that when we're done. I think it's a funny story. Maybe. No. So I mean that would be the first what do you call it issue. I mean, it's like I didn't include this one in the book, but I remember a friend telling me you shouldn't whistle. I was like, why not? He said, because then Iblis he'll come. I was like, okay, he will come. Yeah. And I said, okay, what is he going to do now? He said, I don't know. He said, okay, then I'll stand over here and you'll go over there and we'll whistle. And you can run back and forth.
There's more like that. There's Iblis will play if don't leave candles lit in the house, because Iblis plays with fire, or
it's also included in the book. This with the candle.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's more. I think when you go outside in the evening. Iblis is out, so don't go outside. You know, I'm sure
a lot of people have included them, but I mean,
and it's scary. Look,
about the urination in the ear.
Yeah.
I mean, when you read it at face value, it doesn't make any sense. And the question would be, okay, why is it relevant for me? Okay, if it's not relevant, why should somebody spend precious time on telling me and the entire mankind about this if it doesn't have any relevance whatsoever? So then you look into the language. That, okay, what does it mean to urinate in the ear? I mean, maybe it's a metaphor or something. And I mean, and scholars in the past, they also did this. I mean, I have I have a whole sub-chapter explaining this with the urination in the ear. That it's a way of saying that if somebody urinates in your ear, it's a way of saying that he has humiliated you.
Yeah.
So, meaning that you've done something that pleases Iblis instead of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you slept during Fajr. So it's a way of saying that the thing you did is not a good thing. I mean, basically.
I can accept that, but the literal meaning that which is often interpreted as, at least to people, it just doesn't make sense. And this is one of the reasons why I'm often critical of madrasas, is that, not all madrasas obviously, I'm just saying some of the people we've encountered with growing up and things, is that there is no critical eye to any of these things, and they don't really offer the ability to tell people, hey, you know what, there is more than one explanation to something, you know? And that's something that's been kind of frustrating, at least for many Muslims, you know, in the West, who growing up, because they grow up in the Western education system. You're much more critical of what you learn. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's like what you guys were used to on the bush, either our way or the other way. Either you're with us or you're with them. I mean, it's black or white. I mean, there aren't any nuances. There aren't any room for interpretation. There aren't any room for critical thinking or inquiry, at least. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like some of this stuff just it not only harms your, whatever belief system you've kind of set up in your mind, and how that impacts your behaviors, and I think it does definitely affect your behavior, because when you're telling someone that, you shouldn't go outside at night because Iblis is there, well, then a lot of things can't happen, because at least we in the West, nighttime comes at 5 p.m. in the winters, and
you won't go to.
well, yeah, you won't. You'll be stuck at home for a long time. So we're already under lockdowns and all these things. So talk about Iblis being out at night, ready to infect your mind. I'm sure. Look, there are possible good explanation, and I don't want to discount the Hadith. And it's a very tricky situation too, because some of these you don't know what you're you don't know what you're being critical of, at least from my perspective, right? So when you maybe there is a sound chain up to bottom, of something that on surface level is plausible, and on surface level it looks ridiculous or doesn't appeal to your reason, but you see that the narration is completely sound, every narrator all the way to the prophet. I'm not saying that exists, but let's just say it does. Then you have to respect that, and I don't know, but all I'm saying is that even if all those conditions are met, the interpretation should be, there should be more room to interpret. You can't
with reality, at least. I mean.
Yeah, I don't understand why the literal interpretation is the default.
No, I mean, in my view, the literal interpretation it's a result after a decline in the linguistic what do you call it, in linguistic reasoning, or the linguistic ability of Muslims. I mean, in the past, that we lost this high level of understanding of the Arabic language, and instead we're just holding on to literal interpretations of text, which were never the intention.
No, I think even more than the Arabic language, I think the Arabic language is enlivened in effect. I think we just have we don't have the ability to critique in a productive way. Critique doesn't necessarily mean that you're discounting traditional beliefs that Sunni Muslims carry. It means that you're evaluating them within the scope of what we as Sunni Muslims accept, from the various textual evidences and stuff, Bukhari, Muslim, the Quran, etc. And you're still looking at the traditional interpretations as well, and you're coming up with an understanding that aligns with what we know in this time, at least with regards to whatever we can measure with the scientific instruments and things like that, and what the Hadith and things that offer. And I'm not saying, part of me is still like, I really I think I still believe in things like magic, because I know of enough evidence that I've seen, at least just from my own investigation into those fields, just to see how things operate. I think there are very rare circumstances of possession. I think vast majority of them are mental illness. I'm sure someone like you disagrees with that, and I think you don't agree with possession at all. But I think there is, at least from what I have seen, looking at things that I have seen, with my own eyes. I'm not talking about someone who I heard from or whatever. I'm talking about being part of an exorcism and seeing things that I was like, there's no way this person would know this about me, what I'm doing right behind this person's back. So someone is being treated or being done reading Quran, and the patient, I'm behind the patient, and I kind of slip out my phone, try to record, because I want to see, I wanted this stuff to be on camera. So maybe for whatever reason, for historical reason, I'm not going to post it up on YouTube or whatever, but I just wanted to come back to it. And then the patient starts saying that I pulled out this camera, and there was no reflection in front of him or anything, it was something that was like really hair-raising at that moment. And that there's many other circumstances like that, or examples like that I can't necessarily pull up off the top of my head, but there's many issues like that people who are familiar with the occult, they would know, like, that you, like, for example, if they might say, like, hey, brother Abu Abdulaziz, I'm gonna take you to a witch, and they're gonna take a strand of your hair and they're gonna perform a spell on you. Let's see how much you believe or disbelieve.
Yeah, I would love it.
So for me, there, no matter how much skepticism I have, I still leave enough room in there that, hey, you know what, I don't want to go near that.
I mean, if somebody would offer me that, I'll say, yeah, I'll gladly accept it.
Really? So yeah. you don't have any faith in this?
No.
You think it's for Oh, wow. Yeah. Now that's a challenge. So if there's any sorcerers or witches listening, brother,
yeah, you're welcome.
Abdulaziz from the wonderful country of Denmark has volunteered himself to be under a spell. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, brother. I know it's evening in where you are, but and I know you have a little one that you're expecting soon. Inshallah, we hope and pray that. Yeah, we hope and pray that inshallah that everything is safe and healthy. And do you know what the gender is? Yeah,
but I'm not allowed to speak about it.
Okay, just don't do any gender reveal parties. You know what that is?
No.
Okay, so in America, what they do is the gender reveal parties, where they announce. I don't know. I think they do it in Dubai and some other countries as well. But they have a big party announcing the gender of the baby. Okay, but in America, it's especially different because we end up destroying half the country with forest fires and stuff related to the celebration of the gender reveal. So billions and billions of dollars of damage happens because of these parties. Most recently, it was in California.
Can I comment on your last anecdotes and experiences?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Comment, because I mean. The thing you mentioned, that you saw something, you experienced something. I mean, this is a common pattern in a lot of people who believe in these ideas, because the thing is, you experience something, and there is one or two aspects that you can't explain. So the mental, lexicon, it'll draw on ideas to fill out the gap. So
I'm a skeptic like you, brother. I don't believe in anything. I wanted to see cupboards flying. I wanted to see everything. When I went with this Raqi, I wanted to see all the stuff that happens in the horror movies and the scary things, because I just got a kick out of it, And then when I saw some of the things I saw, I'm like, whoa, this is. I'm not saying I'm 100%, but I'm saying I leave room for the unseen to have some kind of portal into our lives. They have some ability to have some kind of interaction with the physical reality that we see around us. There are some manifestations of how they're able to influence some things, but I'm not saying that they have. I'm not saying they overcome our senses and I still think that we are still the masters of our own domain, that they don't affect our ability to make decisions. I think they can do some things that can influence us in a bad direction or in a negative direction. I think
And if it's the issue of the topic of jinn, I mean, in the book I also write that we're told that they can whisper to us. We don't really understand how they can whisper, but they can whisper in a sense. Okay, we'll accept that because they're clear-cut verses about it. So, okay, we'll accept it.
yeah, but we don't know we don't know how to measure those whispers.
Yeah.
They're not auditory whispers.
We'll just leave it and say, okay, they can whisper in a sense we don't understand.
Because I've woken up from a sleep paralysis and I heard whispers. I'm not sure if that's the same whisper that it's talking about.
That's part of the sleep paralysis. So
Yeah.
That's at least my explanation. That okay, if you're experiencing sleep paralysis, then you'll soon have hallucinations and stuff like that as well. That's part of the experience. So
Yeah, but why is it that a lot of sleep paralysis? I'm not saying each one of them, but at least why is it so many of them are associated with terrifying things like?
Because, like I mentioned before, you have this mental lexicon. So if say you're in the Muslim world and you experience sleep paralysis, so for your mind to make sense of the experience, it'll draw on, okay, what can I fill in here? So if you're in Pakistan, you'll fill in Jurail. It's a witch. You'll drag out a witch, and then you'll see a witch. So in the United States, for instance, with this whole New Age religious stuff, especially with beliefs in what do you call it, aliens and stuff like that.
Yes,
you have a lot of reports and a lot of these sleep paralysis hallucinations dealing with aliens.
Yes.
So you have a lot of reports about alien abduction and stuff like that.
But that's just getting lost in the lexicon of different regions. They're all reporting the same type of some kind of horrible presence, some kind of, you can call it jinn, you can call it alien. They don't know. Americans obviously don't know what jinn are, right? So, and I know in Mexico they have al cucuy or something like that, and in many different
evil spirit or something like that.
Yeah. So, when you have that kind of phenomenon happening, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because the Americans believe in aliens and Muslims believe in jinns.
In the hallucination during the sleep paralysis, you'll draw on your cultural mental lexicon and fill in the gaps, drawing on that.
But why is this paralysis happening after that kind of a dream? So if sleep paralysis was just an interruption in you waking up into your physical state and into your senses,
it's you can basically say body and mind going out of sync.
Yes. So okay? Yeah. So
either the body is still sleeping and the mind is awake, or the mind is half sleeping and the body is awake. I mean, so it's the mismatch, or the going out of sync. It's this part that is in focus. And when you are in this state of mind, you easily hallucinate. It's like being in a dream but being awake.
Yeah.
So and the body can't move because the body still thinks you're sleeping, so you can't move.
Yeah.
This is the last paralysis part.
No, but for me, I try to ignore it. So I try to ignore it, and so it would happen to me repeatedly over a period of weeks. And I thought, you know what? Okay, well, I know what this is. I'm just going to go back to sleep. And then whatever it was, I don't know what whether it's the jinn or whatever, it wasn't clearly happy that I wasn't putting up a struggle to wake up. And I felt like pushing and like a more stronger effort to feel like I'm being choked or something, or it almost feels like for those who don't know what sleep paralysis is, it's like your face is against a pillow, you're trying to wake up, and your face is, you're able to maybe escape. Yeah. Sometimes it's on your chest. It just feels like you can't wake up, and words are barely coming out of your mouth, and you're asking for help or whatever. So, but yeah, when during this period of my life, it was like, I want to say in the late 2000s, it was just wouldn't let go, and it would every other day it was happening, and it got to be a really bad situation because
it's a what do you call it, a bad cycle, because one of the things that causes sleep paralysis is disturbance in your sleep.
Yeah.
It's
like a vicious cycle. It could definitely be a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Where yeah.
Because you get disturbed during your sleep, and if you don't sleep well, you'll get more prone for sleep paralysis. Very vicious cycle, that one.
Yeah, and look, I'm not saying that. For me, I'm just saying it worked when I was told by my good friend Sheikh Amir. I told him about what was going on. He told me, different surahs to recite, and I would go to sleep reading that, and eventually it went away, and I didn't have that problem again. I'm just telling you, just completely unbiased. And I am, for those who know me, who've been listening to the show, they know I'm as critical as it gets. Like, I have no emotional attachment to my ideas or whatever. They know that when it comes to anything beyond the core belief system of Islam, I'm ready to eject. If as long as we're within the scope of Sunni Islam, that's what I want to hang on to. But so that's why I'm not so easy on discrediting a lot of some of the supernatural things. But there are a whole lot of hocus pocus charlatans out there, people who think that they can influence your life, make you marry the girl you've dreamt of, and all kinds of false promises. I'm completely with you on that. I'm just saying that there is this thin barrier where small situations where some of these interactions can happen through a specific medium, my own medium. At least I think different people are more susceptible to that medium than others. I think there is some level of the metaphysical happening that is beyond human understanding, at least at this point. And I can't, and this is all from just my own anecdotal evidences. I'm not saying I have any fact-based empirical evidences where there were measuring tools and things that I've measured related to this. But I'm just saying, at least from the people I have met and from my own experiences, there may be some level of I just don't. I get worried about throwing everything away. When you want to be skeptical, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I
also write a warning in the book, at the beginning of the book, that you shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I mean, I think that's what you're trying to say, that you really don't want to risk doing that. And I'm totally on page with you on that point. I just think we draw the line in a different point in the spectrum.
Yeah, our obvious when someone is reporting, psychological problems, our default shouldn't be jinn, and that's what's happening right now around the Muslim world. Is that anyone who has some kind of mental problem, any kind of they're in some kind of psychological state that's not optimal, people are default thing is like, jinn possession, take them to Iraqi.
Magic, evil eye, something like that.
So, and this is something that some of the Iraqis right now are dealing with as well. They're having to, at least from the ones that I know, the credible ones that I'm in contact with, they tell us this problem is within so many Muslims families that they don't know. Their caseloads are so huge, they don't know who's real, who's not, and so many of the people who they really want investigated, they don't get the time they need because everyone's just default is jinn. Any closing thoughts you have?
Take would be that none of them are related to jinn, but I mean,
yeah, I know. Obviously, for you,
let's see that a lot of the rock is out there. They're saying that, okay, you should beware of charlatans, and we shouldn't just jump to conclusions that this must be jinn, sihr, or whatever.
Yeah.
We should also look out for, seek out medical treatment, mental health treatment, and stuff like that. So I mean, it's a step in the right direction from my perspective.
Yeah.
Reaching the goal would be to entirely get rid of these concepts.
I don't think you're going to get there, but I think you should just be happy with these small victories. But any final words? Or where can they get your book?
The English version, it's available on Amazon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all the Amazon marketplaces that are located in somewhere in the US. I mean, the UK.
I got it from Amazon. So if you're in America listening, you should easily be able to get it from Amazon.
I mean, I'm not, what do you call it? I'm not pushing that everybody should subscribe to my views and stuff like that. But I'm saying, okay, read the book, give it a shot, give me your feedback, give me your criticism, and let's see if we can open a debate.
Yeah, there is a Facebook group around this too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a Facebook group.
Yet. I mean, I'll look forward to having a lot of members in the Facebook group, and also discussions. And I mean, discussions not in the way that we're shouting and calling each other names and stuff, right? But I mean,
that's always this just comes with the territory. You just learn that
debate with respecting disagreement.
Yeah. As a content creator, I can tell you just have to learn to deal with the haters. There's no way to avoid it. You're going to get people yelling at you, and
I know.
That's the price you pay for publishing or putting out anything Islamic into the public space. You better be ready to get the feedback. If you feel like you're going to make everyone's happy, then you'll just be largely ignored. You'll be one of the, the thousands of or millions of other people who are trying to be calling themselves influencers or whatever on social media, and they have no effect on the world. But if you want to make lasting change in the world, you have to be ready for the criticism that comes with it, and also make the sacrifices, at least in your daily rituals and your worship towards God, so that you're stronger.
On Yom Al-Qiyamah, we'll all of us will come fardan. I mean, we'll come single. I mean, I'll be for myself, and you'll be for yourself. And I mean, I'll stand before Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and say, okay, you know what I've done. You saw what I tried to explain and how I tried to explain the deen and stuff like that.
Majority of I hear you. You have to look. That's 90% of the battle is just sincerity, and the willingness to admit you're wrong when you're wrong, and the willingness to find the truth and build on top of the truth and build correct ideas and correct conclusions, so that you arrive at new truths and then build off of those into just having a complete understanding of the world. And that's what thrills me about this podcast and learning and meeting people like you, just the ability to just have new discussions and the ability to critique ourselves and make sure that we build on top of whatever we learned.
So I mean the what do you call it? Yeah, what do you call it? The success criteria from my perspective isn't to be right. It not even to be proven wrong, but I mean just opening the debate. I mean and finding out in a what do you call it? Not in a hateful, but in a constructive manner, collectively arriving at some conclusion. I mean that would be a success criteria from my perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you again, brother Abu Abdulaziz. Make sure you check out his book on Amazon.com. Islam versus Superstition.
UK and all the other marketplaces.
Yes, it's on every. Just Google it, Islam versus Superstition. It'll be there. For our listeners, question, comments, and concerns, contact us at info@themadmamluks.com. Make sure you help us out on patreon.com/themadmamluks. And make sure you click on like, subscribe, and leave a comment in the comment section below. Be gentle towards Brother Abu Abdulaziz, but constructive. You can critique him and you can push back, But try to bring something to the discussion, something meaty. Not just that something like what I just did. Well, I used to wake up a few years ago with the sleep paralysis. That's that's called anecdotal evidence. It's the most weakest form of evidence. That's not something I can actually publish in a journal, saying that, hey, you know what, this is worthy of something that needs to be investigated. You need to bring something more than that, and I think that's what that would help every one of us try to bring out something productive from these kind of dialogues and discussions. Thank you, everyone. We'll see y'all next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.